proceedings will be taking place at the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that is taking place in East Africa, Dar es Salaam. It is the 15th edition that is being held under the theme, The State of the Continent. It's also a moment to reflect on the continent's progress, pressing challenges and hope of the African Renaissance. And Channel Africa's Peter Ndoro, as well as the rest of the Channel Africa team, Tukuluho Mokoena and Nhlanhla Mahlangu, are on the ground to bring us all the latest from Tanzania. And of course, when the lecture is done, we will proceed with all things Africa at Play, where we will go across different parts of the African continent and update you on the latest when it comes to action that's taking place. And of course, we will be having the Producer's Corner with my producer, Andisiwe Fagimalu Zobona Mali, and talk about a variety of issues, including the state of boxing on the African continent, those that have qualified for the Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations, including South Africa's Amajita, who have done so after beating Morocco by 1-0 in the final that took place earlier in the week. And we will also be talking about the Tri-Nations tournament that is taking place in women's football, where we will witness African champions Banyana, who will be heading to Morocco to defend their title. They will be playing against Zambia and Botswana, and this Tri-Nations tournament is preparing all three outfits ahead of the WAFCON tournament that's coming up in July. And of course, we will also be bringing you up to speed with regards to all things Africa at Play. There's a variety of topics that we will be touching on, like the youth football, which is our topic of the day. We will be bringing you a conversation led by Namuchana, our legendary correspondent based in Lusaka, Zambia, who will be talking to the pundits who support and follow football in Africa. For now, let's take a short break. When we come back, we will be going to the topic of the day before we cross to Tanzania.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine.
I want the Africa that makes every single African proud of the continent and have hope. And there's so much stuff that's going on that's positive. And if we can just lock into that, Namaganjan, everyone is going to get there.
Where are we going? Where are we trying to get to?
The idea of working together, which is why I'm excited about this new voice.
And the new voice is me, Asanda Peta, broadcast journalist with about 15 years of experience on the radio space.
Welcome, Asanda. I've been waiting for you for a long time.
Were you waiting for me?
I was.
Really?
Yeah, because for 3 months I was on my own.
So be sure to tune in right here on Channel Africa, Mondays to Fridays, from 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
If you want to know about your continent, this is the best place to start your day.
Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Africa at Play with Neto and Neto Chemane.
14:07 Central African Time. This is Africa at Play, live on DSTV 802 or OpenView 628 if you are here in South Africa. If not, you can reach us from anywhere in the world on DSTV audio on channelafrica.co.za. Later on, we will be crossing to Tanzania to witness the 15th edition of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that's taking place in Dar es Salaam. And our topic of the day, we're talking about youth football, and we want to find out what is the status quo of youth football on the African continent. What happens to this talent, because we don't want a scenario where this talent goes to waste. As we know that young people, when things are not going their way, they end up frustrated, and they could end up in scenarios like substance abuse, and that's precisely what we do not want. This is Africa at Play. Let me now welcome to Africa at Play Andisiwe Fagimalu Zobona Mali to the Producer's Corner as we are gearing up to cross over to Tanzania for the 15th edition of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. On that note, happy Africa Month. Andy Mali, a very warm welcome and a good afternoon to Africa Africa at Play.
Good afternoon to you, Neto, and good afternoon to the Africa at Play listeners across the continent and across the globe. Thank you very much. It's quite a unique show today, waiting to see what the former president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, has to say, on this lecture for in Tanzania. A very special one, and also celebrating Africa Month is quite unique,
And talking about Africa Month, we see a lot of football being played across the African continent. As we speak, on the 28th of May, we will witness the African champions, Banyana Banyana, who will be taking on Botswana. The Zebras of Botswana are also gearing up for the Women Africa Cup of Nations that's taking place in Morocco in July. And there's also the Copper Queens of Zambia that are part of this Tri-Nations tournament. It's such a good initiative to see that Southern Africans decided to play amongst each other because they are heading to the same tournament, and chances are if they continue and do well on the field of play, they might meet each other on the way it could be in the knockout stages, and who knows, maybe they could even take it to as far as the semi-finals and the finals. But of course, there's also the Atlas Lionesses of Morocco hosting this tournament, the Super Falcons of Nigeria. Just your thoughts on this Tri-Nations tournament between the three nations on Southern Africa.
Well, a very interesting one. Looking forward to see what Desiree Ellis and her troops are going to do on the field of play. Given the latest results on how Banyana Banyana has played, they've played very well, Neto, despite that loss to Jamaica, but they've won against Lesotho in their first match of the year, They also won again in the second leg against Lesotho. That was 2-1 and 1-0 wins. And they also, promising in what they will deliver. Former WAFCON champions, in 2022 they lifted the cup, and I'm sure Coach Desiree Ellis, is eager to show it again. But what I've seen with the South African team, as I've been attending also their training sessions, is how coach have given a chance to young players, under 18s, players who play in the league, just to give them that chance, to showcase their talent. So I'm hoping that South Africa will do well, but it will be quite challenging because also other African countries are doing their best, to show their talent and show what they have to showcase in terms of, what they can give in terms of a field of play.
There you have it, and that's how we wrap up the Producer's Corner with Andisiwe Fagimalu Zobona Mali, as we have to cross to Tanzania in a moment. But before we do that, let's find out one more question from Andy Mali. Andy Mali, based on youthful players on the African continent, youth football, you spoke about the under-18s being given an opportunity to be part of the under-20s. Just on the topic of your day, let's pick up on your thoughts. What happens to this talent? Because I believe not every talent gets into systems of professional football.
Well, Neto, it's quite challenging, seeing how our leagues, go through and how players are being called up. I will be specific with South Africa, where the national team coach, which is Hugo Bruce at the moment, is trying to link up with the coaches just to have meetings throughout when the national team is not playing, So I think it's a coordination between the league and the association of that specific country, so that they must link and be able to share conversations. The national team coach must be given an opportunity to speak to the coaches in terms of how to play players and how to give them an opportunity to play. We've seen it's quite unique here in South Africa, and it's quite challenging, where you find that the national team coach is quite frustrated, and we've also seen recently with the under-20 AFCON, where players couldn't go and represent the country, and then now between the players and the public now to say which player must go to the World Cup. If you were not there in the AFCON, why should a player that represented the country should be picked now or to be substituted with the player that was playing for the club, but those players were not available due to different reasons. So it's quite challenging to choose what happens with the talent. And I feel like African countries should give players at a young age. At 16 Neto, players should be given that advantage to say, if you can play football, you must represent your country. If you can play club football, you must, and not wait until a player is 23 and and then now interest from Europe is also kind of low, but so players must be given a chance at a young age. So I feel like the talent should be displayed across the board, and also give young players a chance to showcase their talent.
That's the voice of Andy Mali, and this is the Producer's Corner. We now take a short break. When we come back, we will continue with the Producer's Corner. However, at a certain point, we will have to cross to Tanzania, where the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture is taking place in East Africa, Dar es Salaam, and this is the 15th edition. All this and more after the short break.
Hey guys, question. Have you thought about what happens between 9 o'clock until midday, Saturday and Sunday? Well, it's me. Those that know me call me the fun police, and I'm that girl, that voice on your radio. My name is Pule Mulebati. I'm all about the finer things in life. Where to go, what to wear, who to see, and ultimately what to do. We aspire to bring you the best in travel, entertainment, with a dash or maybe a dose of laughter. And then of course we switch things up a bit when we look at technology. I love what's happening with AI, because you blink, something new pops up. So the challenge is constantly there. I'm learning every single time on the show. So catch me every single Saturday and Sunday at 9 a.m. until 12 midday Central African Time, Baba.
Africa at Play. Beautifully, happily marrying sports and music.
14:15 Central African Time. This is Africa at Play, live on DSTV Audio Bouquet Channel 802 or OpenView 628 if you are based in South Africa. Alternatively, you can reach us from anywhere in the world on channelafrica.co.za, also available on SABC+. Today's version of Africa at Play, it is a unique one indeed, as we will be crossing over to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, to witness the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that is taking place today in celebration of Africa Day, in celebration of Africa Month, but also to table pressing challenges and, of course, to reflect on the hope of African Renaissance, also called rebirth, that will happen in a moment or so. But for now, we still have Andy Mali as we're going through the Producer's Corner, looking at exciting news on the African continent under the umbrella of sport. Andy Mali, the under-20, a lot of people were saying it shows that South African football is investing in youth football. I mean, we've seen the under-20 beating Morocco in the final and heading or booking their ticket to the upcoming World Cup. Your thoughts?
Well, quite an interesting one, Neto. It's nice to see young players in the African continent. And I'm very passionate. I would be biased when it comes to young players, whether it's school football and the juniors, because that's where the talent is, Neto. That's where we identify players, and that's where I feel like players should be given an opportunity, to showcase their talent as young as they are. Because if you look at the European model of football, we seeing 16, 17-year-olds, and being top goal scorers, breaking records. So for African football, we'll never see these guys until you are 23, 24, you're given a chance here and there. So big ups to the South African Football League when it comes to having a reserve side where they say maybe 5 players in the squad should be under 20 players, where they give these guys a chance, to showcase their talent. Because in this past tournament, when it comes to under 20 AFCON, it was quite interesting, to see young guys from different countries. I was impressed by how Nigeria played in this tournament, winning against Tunisia, Morocco also showed up, Kenya came through. It was nice to see the young talent from these different countries. And these are the players that we'll see in the national teams. So it's nice to see them at that age and, watch carefully how they play and the potential in those players. And also what it was negative about this AFCON is that also they were given the spotlight, they were given the broadcasting rights, the AFCON was there, everyone to see. And also the scouts. So it exposes the players to a scouts from different clubs, both in the continent and outside the continent. So it was nice to see South Africa eventually coming winners. They fought very well, against Morocco. It was very tough for the South African team, but it was good to see that the South African coach also, Raymond Daga, was given a chance, because this is a coach that have coached in the Betway Premiership, which is the Premier League here in South Africa, but also having to represent the country at that stage. So I feel like he's a good coach, to have donned that jersey and win this cup. And it was also for South Africa and Morocco, it was sort of a revenge win for South Africa. It was a challenge because these two teams played way back in 1997 when they played together, and South Africa lost at that time. So it was now a payback time for Morocco, South Africa having to win. It's a pity that the coach that was coaching South Africa back then, Coach Sheikh Mashaba, is not feeling well at the moment. So he was not able to voice out how he feels as well, He played players like Stephen Pienaar, Benny McCarthy were there, all those players who became stars now. So hoping that also we'll see from different countries across the continent that were representing, in this tournament, the AFCON, that they will go on and be global superstars, because Africa is very rich. We've seen with this AFCON, it was very, 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 very entertaining, and we've seen a lot when it comes to players and their performance.
That's the voice of Andy Mali, my co-producer on the Producer's Corner. And of course, we will continue with the Producer's Corner after this short break. Please note that today's Africa at Play, it is a unique edition, as we will be crossing to East Africa in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, to witness the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that is taking place today in celebration of Africa Day, which is officially tomorrow on May the 25th. But the lecture is taking place today. And of course, celebrations continues across various parts of the African continent, celebrating the month of May as Africa Month. We take a short break. We'll be back shortly.
You heard something you like on Channel Africa, and you would like to hear it again. Worry not, we've got your back. Just go to our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, and look for our podcast. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwena@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time.
14:22 Central African Time. We are live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. And of course, you can reach us from anywhere you are on channelafrica.co.za. If you are based in South Africa, you can catch us on DSTV Audio Bouquet, channel 802 or OpenView 628. Should you miss out on any of our conversations, please do visit our Channel Africa website and click on Programs and search for Africa at Play. At the bottom right screen of Africa at Play, you can click on More to listen to those conversations when you have time to do so. Today's edition of Africa at Play, it is a unique one, as we will be crossing live to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, to witness the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that's taking place today. Any moment from now, we will be crossing to Tanzania, and when the lecture is done, all things Africa at Play will continue. So do stay tuned to Channel Africa. Do stay tuned to Africa at Play. As Delil Siashaya, we still have my producer Andisi Wefagima Luzabana Mali. Mali, let's dip into the sport of boxing. What's the latest?
Well, there's a lot happening, Neto. We've seen a change when it comes to the management of Boxing South Africa. things are taking on a good tide when it comes to boxing in South Africa. We've seen quite a lot of fighters fighting for world titles. I can mention the likes of Phumelela Kafu, who will be defending his WBO title, which is an interesting one. And I was hoping that he will be able to defend it on the African soil, because when it comes to big fights, unlike back in the days where we have a chance, to host these big fights, because of the currency that is going on in the continent compared to foreign currency, we're lacking here and there. We boxers who are world champions are not able to defend their titles here at home because of the monetary difference between a specific country that the boxer will be facing, where the challenger is coming from. But when it comes to, specifically on the continent, we've seen former South African junior weight champion Nhlanhla Kiga, going back to Cape Town, where he will face Zimbabwean-born boxer Bevin Sibanda, who is based here in South Africa. That will be an interesting one. We'll see how it goes. Because when it comes to these boxers, Nhlanhla Kiga was already there, but I feel like also our boxers need to have that confidence, Neto, because world champions are made from losses. You can't expect to be a world champion boxer while so when you lose one fight, you must be ready.
All right, we now have to cross to Tanzania to witness the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that's taking place in East Africa. It is the 15th edition. Let's find out what's going on in East Africa.
I'm going humbly to request you just to stand for a minute of silence. This is in honor of a former president of the ANC Women's League, Gertrude Shope, who passed away a few days ago at the age of 99. This is one of the veterans of our struggle, the veteran leader of the women of South Africa. As I said, she passed away a few days ago at the age of 99. And please, if we could, in her honor, just stand just for a minute of silence. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. First of all, I'd really like to say thanks a lot to Her Excellency and the President Samia Suluhu Hassan for allowing us to meet as well as we've been meeting in Tanzania and Dar es Salaam over the last few days. And really thanks very much, President, Minister, for the greetings from Her Excellency. I'm very, very glad indeed that she allowed us to host this Africa Day lecture here in Dar es Salaam. As everybody has said, we've got people who are scheduled to speak. This is their day to talk about these African challenges. So I won't be long, because really, basically, I have nothing to say except to say thank you to them for what they're going to say, and welcome, so that they take over this microphone. I'm looking at Generali here. He's one of the people that has to speak. When there's a phrase that they used in basic economics, other things being equal. Other things being equal, I should have retired as president of South Africa in 2009. But the things being unequal, I did in 2008. But before that, some of my colleagues, heads of state at the time, were saying to me that when you retire, you must continue to focus on these African challenges. They were saying to me that you know very well that as a continent we've adopted many, many policies, good policies, for the future of Africa. There's a big deficiency is that there are very, very few people to implement those policies. And so they were saying to me, therefore, when in your retirement, attend to this matter. Let's prepare the people, the human resource, the capital, the human capital to implement these decisions taken by the OAU and the AU. I'm mentioning that because then when we established the foundation, as Ambassador Mpungwe was saying, indeed the understanding was that this was an Africa foundation, not a South African foundation. And one of the very first things we did was to establish an African leadership school to do what my colleagues had been saying. Let's develop the cadres who are going to be focused, be knowledgeable about these Africa policies and act on them. We established this African Leadership Institute at the University of South Africa. That was our, in a sense, first association, formal association with the University of South Africa. And the reason for that was because the University of South Africa, being a distance learning institution, has got a very good footprint on the African continent. I don't know how many, 40 plus African countries. Got students from 40 plus African countries at the University of South Africa. So we thought that to set up this leadership institute of ours focusing on the continent, the best place to put it would be at the University of South Africa. That consideration also affected these Africa Day lectures, because we then also decided at the foundation that in order to mark Africa Day, let's also discuss Africa, hence the Africa Day lectures. So they can focus on one or another matter of the continent to say where are we and what should be done. So the majority with this is the number 15, the current one. The majority of them were held in South Africa, but again, this reminder came that this is not an African, not a South African foundation. It's an African foundation. And therefore, this Africa Day lecture has to move around the continent. I'm very, very glad indeed that now we are here in Tanzania. We should have been here long before. But I must say, Minister, in connection with that, the lifespan of this series is very short. But within that lifespan, this is the third time we're asking Tanzanians to deliver the lecture. It's, I think, a tribute. It's a tribute to the quality of African that this country has produced. We've had the late President Ben Mkapa as our Africa Day lecturer, and may his soul rest in peace. We've had the Honorable Salim Ahmed Salim as our other lecturer, and now we've got the people who are going to speak today. I'm saying it's a very short space of time. It's actually the only country on the continent that's done this thing 3 times. To discuss this very important question, the state of the continent and this re-energization, or whatever the correct word is, of the African Renaissance. To do this thing that we all of us wish for, this rebirth of the African continent. The practical actions that the Minister Kombo has been talking about. Practically, what is it that we do? We've got a vision, we think we know where to go. What are we doing practically? So I really want to say thanks a lot to everybody who agreed to be our speakers today. It may very well be I'm not going to be the one to make that announcement. Max, I don't know if you're going to be the one to actually make it, because it may be that one of the people on our list is stuck in traffic somewhere and may be delayed. But really, that's all really I wanted to say. Say thank you to everybody for coming. Normally what happens, as is happening today, what is happening in this hall is being broadcast through our continent. So it's not only us here who are listening, but many around the continent of Africa are also listening to this. So we are interacting with the rest of the continent about the continent. And I'm very, very glad indeed we've got high caliber people, high caliber thought leaders who've accepted the responsibility to talk to us today. I want to say thanks a lot to them for that and ask them to come and take over. I've done what I'm supposed to do and take over this microphone. Thanks a lot.
Your favorite songs, your favorite stories on your favorite station. This is Channel Africa.
Grande nouvelle à Channel Africa. Vous pouvez désormais écouter et regarder vos émissions préférées sur Channel Africa. Channel Africa diffuse maintenant en direct sur Internet et sur tous nos réseaux sociaux de 6h à 21h, heure d'Afrique centrale, sur Channel Africa 1. Téléchargez l'application SABC+, ou visitez notre site internet www.channelafrica.co.za et rejoignez-nous en direct sur toutes nos pages réseaux sociaux Channel Africa 1. Channel Africa est désormais en diffusion audiovisuelle uniquement pour le plaisir de vos yeux et vos oreilles. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Hey there, this is Balisa Tau, part of the dynamic duo that gives you On the Move right here on Channel Africa from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Africa time. Well, it's with your help for the past 2 years that we have been a multi-award winning show.
But yeah, we're keeping it on the move in 2025. And yes, I'm the other half of the duo, Benjamin Mushatama, and we're going to keep you going with the great conversations.
Turn it up. Okay. On the Move comes back in 2025 to give you more of the content that made us a Maldo and to deliver that bold, boundary-pushing content that you love. And of course, giving you a ride through the 3 hours of news, views, and entertainment.
Every weekday from 9 to midday Central African time, right here on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Cool.
Let's go.
Have you been struggling to find Channel Africa?
Oh yes, where can I find you guys?
Well, you are in luck.
Warning, radioactive zone detected.
Listen to the African perspective on our brand new SABC Plus app. Download the fresh and easy to use app from sabcplus.com or the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Or just command your phone to find SABC Plus on your phone and check out all this good stuff. And that's where you will find Channel Africa, the African perspective. Oh yes, this is fresh and easy. Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time.
Our second panelist is Generali Ulimwengu. The name is known. A fearless commentator, public intellectual, and media leader for many years, whose voice continues to challenge, provoke, and inspire honest dialogue across our continent. Karibu sana mzee wetu. We could not have this discussion without you. And last but certainly not least, I would like to welcome to the stage Professor Issa Shivji, a towering figure in African scholarship, a Pan-African thinker whose work has illuminated the path towards self-reliance, social justice, and ideological clarity for our continent. Professor Shivji, please welcome to the stage. And this conversation will be moderated by myself, Miranda Nyman, your program director for today. Please put your hands together for the panelists.
Africa's very own think tank. This is Channel Africa Online. www.channelafrica.co.za. Join the birthday celebrations this month.
Happy birthday to you. Still connecting Africa to the world.
Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa at Play, beautifully, happily marrying sports and music.
Are where we want to go and what we're going to do. So we do not want to hear from me, but I do want to just provoke, in the words of Professor Shivji. Africa today, a few things for us to think about. Continent of youth is this untapped energy. It's our demographic dividend, 70% under the age of 30. How are we going to harness this energy or waste it? I hope we will touch on this. We've got growing economies, but growth might not be enough. How are we facing inequality? How are we dealing with global shocks? We're seeing huge change globally, and also the urgent need to build resilience on the continent. I would love for you to touch on peace and how we can overcome some of the conflicts in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, and elsewhere, which might be an obstacle to African Renaissance. And to touch on governance as well, under pressure. Is democracy a risk in some African countries? Digital transformation and how we can enhance technology as well, but also how the world is now waking up to Africa, as we were challenged by the foreign minister today. We ourselves might not know our value. How are we going to harness that for the power of the future? So this is Africa that we stand in today, rich with potential. And I'm going to start with the first round, where we are. Professor Kabudi, the first question goes to you. As a legal scholar and policy maker, how would you assess the current state of governance and the rule of law in Africa today, particularly in fostering unity and development across our continent? Karibu sana.
How do I do it here? Thank you very much, moderator. Before I answer that question, let me start by saying how humbling it is to participate in this panel. One, in front of President Thabo Mbeki, a renowned statesman, an intellectual, and who has inspired a lot in the past and in the present. But I'm also so humbled that I am participating in this panel with my teacher, Professor Issa Shivji, who taught me at the University of Dar es Salaam, and I had a privilege later on to be part of the academic staff with him before I was taken to politics, and he remained in academics. And actually, I went to TPH Bookshop. I have bought your 50th anniversary of the class struggle in Tanzania, and I wish they could also reprint the silent class struggle, because I remember when I was a secondary school student at Tosamaganga, I had to walk the whole way from Tosamaganga to Iringa town to buy that book, The Silent Class Struggle, in 1972. So I bought the 50th anniversary. I have read the introduction, and I think it is important for many people to read. I hope you have a copy for President Thabo Mbeki. I'm also more humbled to sit here beside General Ulimwengu. He might not know, but he's the one who inspired me to go to journalism. He used to write a column in the Daily News, Friday Letters. Let me confess, I read, although the English was too daunting, and I had to use the dictionary after every one sentence. But it made me inspired also to join journalism, where I cut my tooth before going to study law. The state of governance and the rule of law in Africa today presents a complex and evolving landscape. The trajectory of the state of governance and rule of law in Africa varies significantly across the continent, with ongoing challenges and some notable successes, but at the same time bereft with reversals and a backsliding. While some African nations have made strides and progress in strengthening their institutions and promoting good governance, others continue to struggle with corruption, weak accountability, and the limitations in rule of law. Africa still suffers from legal pluralism and it still remains a hostage of the legal cultures of the colonial era. We're still influenced by the Anglo-Saxon common law in the case of Tanzania, the Roman Dutch law in the case of Southern African countries, the Lusophone legal culture and systems in Angola and Mozambique, and so on. And we are yet to find our own imprint of an autochthonous and authentic African jurisprudence. So we need to acknowledge these challenges and we need to work on them. And as I said, we need to have a Pan-African legal integration on good governance, which includes strengthening of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, which is based in Arusha. And I was part of those who witnessed the negotiations in Nairobi and the adoption of the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. At that time, I was a university student, but during our recess, I was part of the delegation to Tanzania. And there was a lot of pessimism at that time. Africa was replete with dictators and authoritarian presidents, some of them with excessive brutality. When I talk of Bokassa at that time, but I still remember the words of Leopold Sedar Senghor in that meeting, and I believe Mzee Butiku, you were there. He said, Africa has suffered for 400 years and cannot continue to suffer. Let us make progress of adopting the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Actually, he's the one who strongly talked about people's human rights. And that was the issue of self-determination, but also the issue of Africa asserting itself. So we need to strengthen the African Court of Human and People's Rights based at Arusha, but at the same time in tackling issues of corruption and accountability, we need now to transform the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, which is also based in Arusha, not to be an advisory board, but actually to be an institution which will now tackle issues. And on this, I would like to commend Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan. And I don't want to say because Minister Mahamudu Thabit Kombo has not yet read his budget speech because he's the one who provides funding which goes to the African Court of Human and People's Rights, but also to the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, which is based in Arusha, that now we need to transform this from an advisory board to an institution which will tackle corruption, but also enhance accountability. So what do I want to say? One, there is a need in Africa of consistent application of rule of law, deepening of democratic norms, and we should not be daunted by the challenges ahead of us, but also now continue with robust institutional capacity building, some of which is now being done by the Thabo Foundation, Mbeki Foundation, and all institutions which are involved. Before coming here, I was talking to President Mbeki, that all of us now invite, and now I won't mention the name, I'm a cabinet minister, invite someone from somewhere to come and do induction to our presidents in Africa and the ministers in Africa, and they give us consultants at a fee. Why not use Thabo Mbeki and the other African presidents to do induction to African presidents, to do induction to African ministers in order to solve our problems? Complex, daunting, and challenging, but we don't need to be pessimistic.
Thank you very much, Professor Kabudi. And I hope that the students were listening, the relationship between you and your teacher today, the takeaway messages. Wanafunzi, are you here? Be very respectful to your teachers. As you can see, you might be sitting on a stage together in the future. Thank you, Professor Kabudi, for sharing with us. You say that there's an element of suffering or being a hostage as a continent. Heavy words and colonial legal systems that we've inherited that we are still utilizing today. Generali Ulimwengu, I'd like you to pick up on where Professor Kabudi has left off. And from your perspective as a commentator on African affairs, what are some of the key socio-political and economic trends that you see shaping the continent today? And where might we be falling short with regards to African Renaissance?
Excellencies, I be taken aback by the introduction of the subject by Professor Kabudi, who started this conversation referring to books. And I do have two books with me here. And I would like to assure President Mbeki that I'm not in the habit of trolling part of my library on the streets of Dar es Salaam every day. But today was a special day. As I was coming here, I realized that I have to travel for 1 hour between my place and this place. And I can't spend 1 hour just listening to the radio talks on the Bolt taxi driver's radio. So I always carry a book. So the book I could lay my hands on immediately was Simone Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. Leaders eat last. And I would suggest to the author that maybe he should have said, leaders eat last and least. But I was coming here, as I was coming here, I was told that my book that I had, a copy of which I had lost in Addis Ababa while working on an assignment, had arrived. I wanted to replace it, so somebody ordered it from Amazon, and I got it on my way to this hall, and it's Adam Hochschild, King Leopold's Ghost. Now, these two books are extremely important, and they are linked. I did not know that Professor Kabudi would start with the books, so I didn't prepare myself for this, but I thought, since I have them here, I might as well introduce them to you and base my conversation on that. Leaders eat last. That's the last thing you want to tell African leaders, because they will expel you wherever you are. You don't go around telling African leaders that leaders eat last, because either you'll have no leaders at all after that, or they will expel the man who says that. Because they eat first, and they eat a lot, and they eat too much. And it's a big problem for the governance that you're talking about. And unless we solve this problem of how leaders eat, we may never get out of the quagmire in which we are. We know that Africa, as you say, Africa is not one country. Africa is a diverse tapestry of countries, cultures, governance systems, and so on and so forth. And we have made some advances somewhere in certain areas, and we have made reverses, sometimes very serious reverses in our governance structures. But it's all centered around the issue of eating, who eats what, how much, and for what reason. The issues of corruption. President Mbeki has been very busy over the past, I don't know how many years, maybe 30 years, talking about the illicit financial flows out of Africa. I think the last time I looked was something like 70 billion dollars a year, and it's still continuing. And if you look at those figures that President Mbeki has been giving, most of the hemorrhage, most of the financial hemorrhage that Africa is suffering from is occasioned by people who we call leaders. I have changed my lexicon. I no longer refer to them as leaders. I refer to them as rulers, very much the same as the colonial rulers we had before, and very much the same like the apartheid rulers that you had in South Africa. Now, for any governance conversation to take place, when there is a South African an eminent South African personality in your midst. We must go back to 1955 at Cliptown, and the Freedom Charter that the ANC adopted as the Bible and the roadmap of South Africa when South Africa becomes independent, becomes free from racism and apartheid. Well, South Africa got rid of apartheid officially in 1994, we all know. But let us ask the South Africans in our midst here, is it true that the people of South Africa are governing? Because one of the first principles of the Freedom Charter was the people shall govern. The people shall govern. Now, in South Africa, I don't know whether this is reality, but in the rest of Africa, is this really what is happening in our countries? Here in Tanzania, for instance, or in Kenya, or in Uganda, or in Gambia, or in Senegal? What is it? Why have we failed to transform national independence to people's freedom? Why is national independence such an empty concept that has a national anthem, has a national flag, has a national parliament, and so on and so forth? But in reality, it is completely devoid of substance, where people can feel in their country that they are free, they are in control, they are the masters and mistresses of what they survey. So the number one issue is about who eats first, and the number two issue is who rules over our countries, including our economies, our politics, our culture, our social services, and so on and so forth. I pause there.
Thank you very much for sharing that. To play devil's advocate, Mr. Ulimwengu, some people might say the male lion eats first and then the family follow once they make a kill. But I think you've made a very, very powerful point there. How do we lead at family level, in our community, in the institutions we're leading? And as leaders, we should be eating last, putting the people forward. I think you've made a very powerful point. Thank you for that. We will come back to you in just a moment. Now, Professor Shivji, you've heard what has been shared here by Professor Kabudi and Mr. Ulimwengu as well. From your perspective, looking at it from an academic perspective in particular, what do you believe to be the most pressing economic and structural challenges that might be facing the continent? And how might they impact our ability to achieve self-reliance? Or do you believe we already are self-reliant?
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. First, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts. It seems to me that if we want to know where we are at, we have to know how did we arrive where we are. So we have to know how did we arrive at this state that we are in today. And here I would like to make 3 points very quickly, given the constraint of time. One, at the time of independence, we inherited colonial economy. And one of the main features of this economy was that it was integrated vertically, externally to the metropolitan countries. But internally, it was disarticulated. Internally, there was no relation between various sectors because they all were geared and structured for external demands and external interests of the metropolitan country. But in essence, in political economy, these structures resulted in siphoning off of surplus from our countries. So while our countries was the site of producing surplus. The site of accumulation of that surplus was metropolitan country, what we call capital. There was very little accumulation within our own countries. And whatever there was, it was mainly the form of merchant capital, not productive capital. This is what we call underdevelopment. That is the first point I would like to make. Two, and I think this is important to remember generally, that the first generation of our post-colonial leaders, regardless of all the problems that we had, did try to address some of these issues. For example, there was very little industrial development by colonialism. So, in many countries, regardless of their political orientation, they embarked on some kind of import substitution industrialization. In many of our countries. And this happened, of import substitution industrialization. What were its problems? But it was done. So we had some kind of industrialization in our countries. Secondly, to address the extremely low standards of living of our people from colonialism, they addressed the issue of the standard of living as well, in two ways. One, by trying to subsidize basic needs, and two, by developing social sectors, education, health, water, etc. Okay? And three, since there was no private capital to do it internally, or whatever there was, it was not prepared to do this. And of course, foreign capital was not interested in doing it. So inevitably, there was an expansion in the public sector. The state had to intervene. So all over Africa, in many countries, we had an expansion of the public sector. And regardless of whether the countries called themselves socialist or capitalist. For example, Malawi had one of the biggest public sectors. Malawi was by no means socialist, because this was inevitable, as I said. And this, as we know, in developing countries, in economics, are called register regimes, which you find in many developing countries. Now, then came, and this is my third point, then came the onslaught of neoliberalism, the so-called Washington Consensus, spearheaded by Reagan and Thatcher. In the late 70s and early 80s, many of the African countries found themselves in deep economic crisis. I will not go into the reasons for this, but one of the crises was heavy debt burden. We had fallen prey to the salesmen who came and sold loans to us, and we took them. So we were heavily indebted. So African states were vulnerable. The result was that when the structural adjustment programs came, now imperialism took offensive. During that period, it was on the defensive. Now it took offensive. Okay? So they began imposing structural adjustment programs in neoliberal policies. Now, neoliberal policies, as you know, the mantra there is free market. Okay? Liberalization, marketization, privatization. Okay? And by the way, because we are so used to using this term, I heard it also at the university. It was neoliberalism, the World Bank, the third generation of structural adjustment program, which coined the term good governance. Good governance is not coined by us. It was coined by the World Bank. Okay? The Arusha Declaration did not talk about good governance. It did not talk about Utawala Bora. He talked about uongozi bora, good leadership. Democratic governance, yes, but good governance is meaningless. It's a moral term. Okay, who decides what is good governance? Anyway, the point I'm making is that this neoliberal onslaught, okay, which integrated us further into the international value chains, both commodity chains and financial chains. We found ourselves at the most exploitative end of those chains. The surplus continued to be drained from our economies. Okay? There are figures and so on, I'm not going to cite them, in various ways. Neoliberalism and the structural adjustment programs over the last 3 decades has had devastating effects in our society. It destroyed the social fabric of our societies. Our society has become extremely polarized, with a small group of people obscenely rich, and a large majority of the people filthy poor. Go to any African countries. Once you step outside the main highways and streets, you will see the poverty. And in our villages, to this day. There was rise in absolute relative poverty. Figures are there. Unemployment rising by the day. Today we all talk about youth unemployment. It's a real issue in Africa. But few of us are prepared to admit that partly, if not wholly, is due to the kind of policies that imposed on us and which we embraced. These leaders who eat first, embraced them, because they could continue eating first. It was in their interest to embrace them. So these were embraced. And as a result, this is what we found ourselves in. This is the kind of condition we found ourselves in. Now, what shall we say? Because the question of self-reliance. Of course, this meant, net result was that today, in my view, with some exceptions here and there, we are more dependent than we were at the time of independence. Forget the question of self-reliance. There's no self-reliance. We are, in fact, more dependent today than we were at the time of independence. To the extent that all that we said about the right to self-determination, okay, we literally squandered our self-determination. We hardly make our own decisions. Let's be frank and admit it. We don't need to be diplomats when we have such dialogue. We hardly make our own decisions. We are told to decide what alternatives to be given. Tony Blair today has more respect and is welcoming our state houses to advise and as a consultant than the consultants of Africa themselves. So today we are more independent than we were at the time of independence. Let me stop.
Professor, you've really provoked us there. We are less self-reliant than we were when we first gained independence. A bitter pill to swallow, perhaps, for those that might not be really digesting that reality. And I want to leave ample time for thinking about the tactical solutions. I want to move swiftly on to look at the future and where we would like to be. You've all painted quite a bleak, if I might say, picture of where we are, although we are still brimming with potential, I believe. So maybe can you paint the picture for us all now of where we want to be, the Africa that we're determined to build, and how we can expand on the spirit of Pan-Africanism, how we can pick up where we've left off. And I'm going to come to you first, Professor Kabudi. How can we strengthen the institutions that we've put in place? You've touched on some recommendations earlier, but particularly around Agenda 2063 that's been outlined by the African Union. What role should regional bodies play, and what role does the African Union now have? Karibu.
Thank you so much. Actually, if you look at the Agenda 2063, is encapsulated by the words, what we want is an integrated, prosperous, and a peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. Now, if you look at that, it talks about entrenching a culture of human rights, democracy, gender equality, inclusion and peace. At the same time, prosperity, security, and safety for all citizens, and see mechanism to promote and defend the continent's collective security and interests. Now, in view of those which I have alluded, African institutions, in order to realize these objectives, I'm of the view we need to do the following. One is to build capable development states. And this is what Professor Shivji said. If you look at the first generation of African leaders, we may criticize of what they did. If you look at the Arusha Declaration, in the case of Kenya, if you go to sessional paper number 10 by Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki on African socialism, which was not implemented. If you look at Kaunda's humanism, if you look at Obote's Common Man Charter, their interest was to develop a capable development state, which addresses the challenges of development in terms of poverty, disease, and ignorance. So we need now more than before to build capable development states. And here is where somehow I am much more attracted to the Southern African Development Community. The word development, which means this is a community which focuses on development, but obviously also trade and other aspects. Two, we need to foster citizens' participation. And when I say citizens' participation, here we need to address the majority of citizens who are the youth. How the African youth are going to be engaged and allowed to be involved in the development of their continent. And here matters of education, matters of skill, matters of knowledge need to be emphasized. See, for the governments, and I'm part of the government, is to adopt a result-based approach. A result-based approach. And later on, I'll give examples. And the three is revitalizing our strategic planning. This month, I was flying back from Mumbai, where I had attended the World Summit on Entertainment Industry. And lucky enough, when I was in the Ethiopian Airlines, reading the flight magazine, Salamta, UNISA, they have advertised in Salamta. And immediately I saw that, I screenshot it, and send it to our Minister for Education, Science and Technology, Professor Adolf Mkenda. Now, and I'm allowed to read to you that, what UNISA says, and which I share when it comes to revitalizing strategic planning. In that Ethiopian Airlines flight magazine, UNISA, they have come with what they say, preparing Africa for next century. And they have come with 10 things. One, marine studies. I want to go to the details. Two, space studies. We need to invest in space science and space economy. And actually, too many Tanzanians won't know. If you go today to St. Joseph University of Tanzania at Luguruni, professors there and the students, they've been able to manufacture a nano satellite. Dr. Amani Bura, under the leadership of Professor Mnene, who in 1986 wrote an article of how to use satellites for rural development in Tanzania. Space sciences, space economy. The other thing, UNISA, Industry 4.0. I want to believe it's the fourth industrial revolution. And actually we have all the minerals in Africa for the fourth industrial revolution. Coltan in Africa, cobalt in Africa, nickel in Africa, platinum in Africa. So we have all the necessary minerals to make Africa lead in the Industry 4.0. 5, aviation studies. I won't go to the detail because I don't want the Vice Chancellor of University of UNISA to have something to say also. 6, automation studies. The world is moving from fossil fuel to electric vehicles. And we have all the minerals we need. Tanzania, we have abundant nickel sulfide and nickel laterite, graphite, and everything you need. South Africa are far developed in manufacturing of cars. We could today think of strategic planning. Tanzania produces the batteries, another country the mufflers, another country the bodies, and another country. So, and another thing, UNISA, which for me is what we need to focus on, the biotechnological studies. I was the Minister for Foreign Affairs and the East African Cooperation during COVID-19, and I was the chair of the Council of Ministers. Actually, President Thabo Mbeki, I had initiated a study, and when Stogomena Tax was the secretary, to link the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, from Dar es Salaam to Lobito, Tazara, and the Benguela Leroy. In the midst of that, we had COVID-19. In this...
Dad, I'm a genius! We don't have to freeze it!
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. This is what memories are made of.
Love don't care who you be, where you there from. Love don't
On
care.
Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa at Play with Neto and Neto Chemane.
University of Dar es Salaam, Professor Jones, had written a book on resources of Tanzania, use, misuse, and abuse. And in it, he had a list of 26 essential oils. And it is these 26 essential oils which we use to produce our own medicine, which took care of us. The Bupiji and the Buyegi. Today, the Bupiji and the Buyegi has been shoved off. So biotechnological studies. And number 9. What's number 9? Where is number 9? Had forgotten energy studies. Energy studies. All of us, when we are students of development studies, and our mentors are here, the Professor Shivjis, we always say, without electricity, there's no development. And we read Vladimir Ilyich Lenin about the importance of electricity. If Congo is going to be stable and peaceful, the Congo River is able to produce enough electricity for the entire continent and surplus. But also the green energy, solar, wind. But the most important thing, which I learned also number 9, the health studies. Health studies of how Africa is going to prepare itself, one, to tackle epidemics when they happen. We all remember here in Tanzania, we are producing our own vaccines for measles and polio. Come privatization, we closed all those industries. And today, we are 100% dependent on vaccination from outside. And I remember during COVID-19, it was very, 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 very very, very concerning to see African leaders sitting in Addis Ababa discussing how to distribute among the African countries donation of vaccines against COVID-19 from other countries. And it is when Tanzania sponsored one of the resolutions which was taken by the then chairperson of the AU, Cyril Ramaphosa, of how Africa is going to produce its own vaccines. And we cannot do that without biotechnological studies and the health studies. And the last one, student support. So actually, when we talk of the future, mine will be those four. What should the AU do? One, coordination. Coordination. One of our main weaknesses is coordination. And another weakness of ours is monitoring and evaluation. We adopt a lot of resolutions, sign a lot of MOUs, and a lot of agreements. No plan of action, no monitoring, no evaluation. So for me, we need now, at the continental level, strong coordination, but also monitoring and evaluation, but also now building a culture of respecting our own resolutions, implementing them, following them up. And the approach of Africa for many years has been of competition instead of complementing our efforts. Tanzania is not competing with any country. South Africa is not competing with any country. Let us look at the strength of each country and complement our efforts in order to achieve developed Africa, self-reliant Africa, Africa which is capable of defending itself, feeding itself, and the Africa which gives hope to the future generations of Africa who will come, because they will inherit a developed Africa, which, as I said, which has suffered a lot from colonial rule, but also from our own misrule and our own misplanning. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kabudi. The Africa that you've laid out is an Africa that the youth are going to inherit, that are going to live in, the one that we are trying to envision. So I'm glad that you've raised them and the importance of participation. And I recall when Tanzania was going through the Vision 2050 process of putting together the strategic document, there was extensive engagement across society, which is critical for moving the country forward. And Professor Puleng, I hope you received your flowers there, that very impactful advert. Nice return on investment there. Generali Ulimwengu, this is a question that is quite fitting because sitting next to you, because I'm going to talk to you about culture and media, and the Honorable Minister is sitting right next to you, so you can feel free to talk to him directly. But the question that I'd like to put to you today is, what role do you believe culture, media, and youth engagement will play in shaping the shared vision for Africa laid out by Professor Kabudi and others, our forefathers, and how can we inspire a sense of collective purpose across diverse African societies? Karibu sana.
Thank you very much. Culture, spirituality, I may add the arts, our music, our dances, our storytelling. These are attributes that are at the base of Africa's very existence. I am currently doing a study, and in a few days I'll be launching a book on Pan-Africanism, and I've gone into this, and I've seen how this has, how the issues pertaining to culture, to music, to the arts, to the drum, have been fundamental in the resilience, in building the resilience, the survival and resilience of Africans, especially during the period that has been known now as Maafa. Maafa, which is a Swahili word denoting catastrophe, that befell the African continent, and people were exported, were kidnapped on the continent, exported to the Americas, to the Caribbean, to Europe, and elsewhere. And how they survived those extreme conditions of brutality, dehumanization, and to emerge as a people reaching out to other people who are like themselves, and to form bonds that eventually eventuated in what we call Pan-Africanism today. It's a very powerful story. People who were originally Bakongo or Wolof or Makonde or Ashanti, now finding themselves in these plantations, whether in the Caribbean or in the United States or South America, and they didn't know they were African at that moment, until their owners, the slave master, started calling them, "You African, come here." And they said, "What? I'm African now?" And they started realizing that they came from the same place, and eventually this did lead to people like W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and the others, to come together and say, and in this list there is a very eminent South African, Isaka Seme, who was a thinker at the turn of the 19th century of the Pan-Africanist movement. So the arts are very important, because for Africans, the music and the drum and the song are not just objects of entertainment. They are also a spiritual way of reconnecting with their roots, remembering who they are and what they have gone through, the suffering they have had to deal with, the way they resisted that brutal experience, how they emerged victorious until they came to where we are right now. The healing powers of our medicine man and woman in the African setting, in the black American settings in Louisiana or in Cuba or in Brazil, the new religions that were amalgams of whether it was Catholicism or Presbyterianism with the original African belief systems, and how where these created a melange of spiritualism that became powerful, and so on and so forth. These are things that we need to get our young people to study and understand better, and also to develop our own governance systems. We are talking about issues like economic development, which are very good, financial stability, and so on and so forth, stock exchanges, and so on and so forth. But unless you have figured out your governance systems, all this is not going to work. Professor here is talking about the COVID experience, which is only a few years ago. But this country suffered the loss of so many vibrant young people who could have continued giving their services to this country, because we had the wrong kind of leadership, which thought that this was not a problem. They called on people to go and pray and fast and be strong or something like that. Now, if you tell me a courageous, fearless Maasai Moran with his spear or the Sime is going to confront a lion, I will call him a great warrior. But if you tell me anybody can stand up and fight a virus empty-handed, I would say I'm looking at a fool. And because of that, we lost a lot of people, young people who are vibrant, strong, energetic, vital to the economy of this country, because we had very bad leadership that believed in junk science and superstition. So governance comes first. Now, President Mbeki was instrumental in the foundation of the Africa peer review mechanism, APRM, which was started at the beginning of the 2000s and so on and so forth, and went around the continent where people, countries would invite experts and observers to come and look at how they are doing their thing, how they are doing their economy, how they are doing their politics, how they are doing their cultural activities, and so on and so forth, and pronounce a verdict, kind of, saying this is good, this is good, this is not so good, this is bad. And it went on for some time. And you know what the Africans did eventually? They started taking APRM as a beauty pageant, where literally they were saying, come and look at how beautiful I am, look at me, how I am, look at me when I'm dressed in my African dress and when I'm dressed in the European attire and so on and so forth. And APRM, Mr. President, I think right now is a dead letter. It's no longer effective. And I think it's gasping for oxygen. So I would make a call that we go back to the ideals that presided over the formation of things like the APRM, and maybe develop other products as well to accompany it, to make it thoroughgoing and serious, and to make Africans accept that when your neighbor is coming to look at you, he's not coming there to criticize you necessarily, but to show you where you might improve your efforts, where you may concentrate your resources, and so on and so forth. Because otherwise, all this that we are doing, all the good things that the professor has been talking about will come to naught unless they are put in the hands of people who know they are there to serve the people and not to rule over them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for provoking us once again, which is necessary. One of the things that you touched on was brain drain. So seeing our great minds moving out of the country, and I want to turn to you, Professor Shivji, please. How can we reclaim intellectual and ideological leadership on the continent? We were leading in that area. How do we reclaim that as we build the Africa we want? And then we are turning very swiftly to what are we going to do? So bridging the gap between the Africa you've put before us today, the aspiration, and where we are. Karibu.
How do we reclaim ideological and intellectual leadership? Reclaim we must. How do we do it? But let me quickly point out that in the immediate post-colonial period, both externally and internally, Africa did exercise intellectual and ideological leadership. For example, the councils of UN, United Nations. This was a time when we had the right to development, which was pushed by Africa. We had the two international conventions, 1966, on civil and political rights and social, economic, and cultural rights, which were adopted by the United Nations. And one of the important provisions in both these conventions was right to self-determination. Right to self-determination. And that is why US refused to ratify those conventions. because they objected to the right to self-determination. We had UNCTAD, for example, as a counterpoint to the World Bank and IMF. And if you read some of the UNCTAD reports of that time, they're extremely revealing. I think it was the first or second conference of UNCTAD which was held in Algiers, where Che Guevara was present, I think Babu was present, Abdullah Muhammad Babu and so on. Then there was a very important initiative of the United Nations passing the resolution on the permanent sovereignty over natural resources. Okay? But with the whole neoliberal onslaught, these have all been lost. We lost our intellectual leadership externally and also internally. Internally, the sites of knowledge production, the sites of ideological and intellectual debates were our universities. Largely were our universities, whether it was University of Dar es Salaam or it was University of Ahmad Bello in Nigeria, or Ibadan in Nigeria, okay, Nairobi, Makerere, etc. But with the neoliberalization of our universities, there was extreme amount of repression. Today at the University of Dar es Salaam, if the students want to organize a public lecture by President Thabo Mbeki, they will have to first get a what we call kibali, that is a permit. Okay? This is the same university which produced immense debates in the late 60s and early 70s. Okay? So we have actually destroyed through repression and suppression our sites of knowledge and our sites of discussions and debates. So in no small measure, we are to blame how we have lost intellectual leadership, simply because our rulers, yes, I won't call them leaders, our rulers cannot afford, they're so insecure, they cannot tolerate any dissident voices. They cannot tolerate critics. Okay? And this is true, not only in my country, but in other countries as well. Okay, we are witnessing a very repressive regimes in Africa, all over. Now, how do we reclaim that? The other day at the university, President Thabo Mbeki was talking about agency. Of course, to reclaim this, to bring about a new awakening, resurgence, we needed agency. And I would say the first and foremost agency are working people. I think our states, you may critically engage with the states, but the states have proved a total failure with that regard. Okay? So the working people will have to take the destiny in their own hands. Of course, there will be what we call, in Gramscian terms, organic intellectuals, collaborating with the people. Okay? And when I say organic intellectuals, what do I mean? By intellectuals, I don't simply mean academia. I mean artists. I mean cultural workers. I mean journalists. I mean village and street intellectuals. And we have pockets, particularly among the youth, of these intellectuals who are prepared, in Cabral's terms, to commit suicide as petty bourgeoisie and join the people. So it is this kind of combination, which it seems to me, will be the agency for the development. And ideology. In Africa, in the African continent, I think it's the only continent where we have very powerful ideology in Pan-Africanism. It is more than a century old now. We had very powerful ideology, political ideology, and political movements inspired by Pan-Africanism. Let us not forget, African nationalism was born of Pan-Africanism, not the other way around. That is why I get very upset when people talk about the example of European unity. It's not a parallel at all to Pan-Africanism. Okay? So we have a powerful ideology. How do we revive that ideology in the present context? I think that's a big challenge, but it's possible. And we have pockets of youth who are going back to Pan-African ideology all over the continent. All over the continent. And these have to be threaded together. So I don't think we have to look elsewhere for ideologies. We have an ideology, very powerful ideology. And as General was pointing out, that means that it will make us rethink our governance structures. The representative democracy is with multi-party and elections has actually proved its limits. We have to go beyond that. We really have to go beyond that in terms of real participatory democracy, bottom up. And we have necessary institutions in some countries for that. Let me stop there.
Thank you. You've painted a very clear picture there of what intellectualism or reclaiming our ideology could look like, that actually we already have quite a diverse intellectual bank on the continent, and how do we really harness that? And you also said our destiny is in our hands, and that segues us very nicely to the final part, and I think the most important part, which is what are the tactical, practical strategies or actions we can take to get us from where we were, where we are today, to where we wish to be, so that we can bridge that gap. Gen Z call those growth hacks. What are the growth hacks for Africa? And I know that you've touched on some of them through the course of your remarks, but I'd like to give you a final opportunity to share with everyone today, both in the room and online, what needs to be done, practical and tactical. Professor Kabudi, karibu. And maybe you wish to focus on the government and institutions, how they can overcome barriers.
Thank you very much. One, we need to address the root causes of conflict and promote peace. As I said, if Congo today is allowed to be peaceful, Africa will change. The most unfortunate thing, wherever one country we know, when they discovered oil in that country, Africa thought now it is going to be the engine of development. What followed? Coup d'etat, military rule, corruption. Another country. When also gas was discovered, is now in turmoil and conflict and insurgents. So once we address that, Africa is capable of developing itself. Two, we need now to implement regional trade and development agreements. We are now talking about the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, a very promising thing. We need to work hard on it. And actually, this is an institution which is headed by a very young person. And I was in Addis Ababa when actually the three were being interviewed. And we said, perhaps this is the time now to allow young people to lead some of these institutions. He was in his mid-30s, Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Three, we need now to invest in integrated regional industrialization. You know, Tanganyika was the Cinderella of East Africa for very good reasons. We're not a British colony, legally. We were a United Nations trustship territory. And as a result, the administering authority did not invest much in what was Tanganyika. The same fate with Rwanda and Burundi, we were under the Belgians. So come 1961, we get our independence. 1964 is when now Tanganyika is pushing for regional industrialization. The Kampala Agreement of 1964, where we agreed what kind of industries should be built in which country. Tanganyika was given transistor radio, motor car tires, Philips and Matsushita, General Tire, Portland Cement. Uganda, it was textile, confectionaries and sugar. What happened to the Kampala Agreement of 1964 is not a matter of discussion. But I'm looking at the model of Mwalimu Nyerere and his colleagues in 1964, where now we need to sit down and agree what type of industries need to be built there for the African market. That is what Europe has done. Without that, Portugal, Spain, and Greece will be backward. Pharmaceuticals assigned to Spain, opticals assigned to Portugal. We need to do the same. And when I was part of the negotiations of the East African Common Market Protocol, when we are discussing about this, some people thought that we are still in the nostalgia of Nyerere's socialism. No. We said, let us agree. What goes to Burundi, what goes to Rwanda, what goes to Tanzania, what goes to Uganda. So that whoever comes to East Africa, he wants to invest, let us say, in bicycles, we say go to Burundi. It is in Burundi where bicycles for the entire East African market will be manufactured. But also, look at the synergies. The coffee that is produced in Buhigwe and the coffee that is produced in Makamba province of Burundi, let be it collected in one industry and goes outside Burundi and Tanzania as the produce of East Africa. Another thing is invest in regional infrastructure development. We talk about free movement of goods. How do you move goods from Nkasi to Tororo, from Tororo to Songea? And this is why I applaud the position of the government of Tanzania now investing in the standard gauge railway. And when I talk about the standard gauge railway, of which I'm very happy that President Thabo Mbeki was able to ride from Dar es Salaam to Morogoro. And the stretch from Dar es Salaam to Morogoro was 100% financed by ourselves. How did we achieve that? Is when there were no more trips to outside Tanzania, no more conferences in posh hotels where we had to go with water and cashew nuts. It is from those savings we were able to build the stretch from Dar es Salaam to Morogoro. Because many financiers were not interested. Their feasibility study and the business plans ended at the border between Tanzania and Burundi, the border of Tanzania and Rwanda, and we told them no. And this is why the decision of President Samia and President Ndayishimiye of now building an SGR from Uvinza to Msongati to Kitega and then to Kindu in DRC, and from Kindu to go down to Lubumbashi, and from Lubumbashi to go to Lobito. That's how we need to go. And now another stretch from Mwanza is going on to Isaka to Kigali. And from Kigali, it will go and connect with the SGR, which comes from Mombasa to Uganda, and then Uganda to the DRC. This is why it is to our interest that DRC becomes stable and peaceful. Another thing is to focus on capacity building. And here I'll talk about capacity building of R&D. Africa, we are spending less in R&D, research and development, because we have been cajoled that you don't need to invest in R&D. You can go and take for no. We need to invest in R&D. But promoting culture, and that is where I go to where General Member said, with this age of artificial intelligence, we need now to invest more of having a cultured, enlightened African citizenry. A cultured African citizenry, be it in literature, be it in music, be it in anything. So these are the areas where, and here I would want now to touch on one thing, because I know we are going to the end, and this is under my portfolio. I was so moved to see you, President Thabo Mbeki, and your colleagues at Solomon Mahalangu. I escorted President Cyril Ramaphosa there. And actually, Next time, you should not only end in Mazimbu. Come to my constituency. I'm a member of Parliament of Kilosa constituency, where one of my citizens is Professor Issa Mchibji. And for your information, the school which you did your class 1 to class 4, we have refurbished it. I'm preparing for your visit to Kilosa.
The student-teacher relationship is deepening now.
See, come to Dakawa. And you see the dreams of Oliver Tambo and Julius Nyerere to prepare young South Africans, once South Africa is free, for them to go back to South Africa skilled. Come and see the Vocation Training Center, which was built in order to prepare young South Africans. Once they go there, they go as skilled. It is still working today as the Dakawa Vocational Education Training Institute. And the machines which were imported for leather products, for textile, they are still working. The teacher training school for South Africans, it is now our teachers training school, Dakawa. And the girls' secondary school, which was training the South African girls, is now our Dakawa Girls High School. Which means what? We also need to valorize the liberation struggle heritage. We are not talking about the past. We are talking about how we are living it. And I was telling President Mbeki before coming here, in Tanzania, we have 174 graves of South Africans who sleep here in their country. And this is why, President Mbeki, it was not a matter of conspiracy that I invited. We have here 2 Ngoni chiefs from Songea. These are the ones who their great forefathers left South Africa during the Mfekane in 1840. And when I was still in academics, regularly visiting the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the University of Zululand on a project on indigenous knowledge, I said we need now, President Mbeki, to have a project of rewriting the Mfekane and the so-called Ngoni invention. Because the way it has been written in history books, it was as if it was an invention of savages. And we have not looked at the positive things. And the ambassador of Burundi is here. I want to tell you, these people went up to Burundi in Makamba province. Today you go to Burundi in the Makamba province, some of them are the same generation. So we need to sit down now, look at the question of culture, but our own history. And one of the aspects which I would want the University of KwaZulu-Natal, UNISA, and the other universities is to look at this question. Why is it important? Because of what is happening to the young generation in South Africa. Because of many other challenges, poverty and the rest. Xenophobia.
Professor.
In order to address that, we need now to have collective projects over our memories and our heritage in order to know that we have one destiny of an Africa which is the same. And this is why now my last word. When we are discussing about linking Dar es Salaam and Lobito, there was a lot of questions. You know, once you link Tazara and Benguela, the Dar es Salaam port is going to lose to Lobito. We said, for whose sake is going to lose? There'll be goods from the Caribbean, there'll be goods from Latin America, passing through Lobito to Dar es Salaam to go to Southeast Asia, and vice versa. And I'm happy that now, under the leadership of my colleague, Ambassador Mahamoud Thabiti Kombo Jecha, and the President Samia Suluhu Hassan, now we are going to link Tazara and the Benguela Lele, which means for the first time that the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean will be linked.
Thank you very much,
and in
Professor.
Geopolitics. And then I end
Professor,
up.
you're giving all the points.
Yeah.
Your panelists won't have anything left to say.
One good thing, and then I end it.
Thank you.
Once we do that, and then we link, because we are talking about the Great North, Cairo and Cape Town, but we are linking now with the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you so much. You know, I have, let me confess, I have missed these kind of occasions for many times.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. I hope that we can get an invitation maybe from UNISA to come and do a visiting lecture. As you can see, Professor is very passionate. He has so many gems to share. He's touched on so many points. I'm looking at my other 2 panelists. Is there anything else you want to add that has not been mentioned by Professor Kabudi that you feel needs to be done? If I could give you a minute each, Generali, please, and then Professor Shivji. Things that have not been mentioned by Professor Kabudi. Karibu sana. We try to focus on just the ones that have not been mentioned.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Only one thing. We're coming to the end, and I cannot leave this place without making a pitch, particularly about my project, which I alluded to a little while ago, and that is the teaching of Pan-Africanism to the young Africans of today. The importance of the movement to the African people's development, survival, and progress is so important that it cannot be overemphasized. It is one of the things which unfortunately we don't teach to our children in our schools, but which is so pertinent to make Africans grow up with a certain spirit of unity, of oneness, of self-confidence, of a can-do spirit, and an ethos that propulses them into the future. We're talking about exploring the oceans, exploring space. But these cannot, and the other things, they cannot be achieved unless we inculcate in our youth a spirit of self-reliance, of self-worth, self-belief, and self-belief in yourself. Know where you came from, know where you came to, what you went through, what tribulations you had to undergo to get where you are, and to know that whatever difficulties you have in face of you, you'll always triumph if you believe in yourself and if you connect with your fellow African and other human beings. Of course, you can always triumph over all those tribulations. President Mbeki will be making a trip to South Africa to come and present you with a copy. It's a very small book, but full of information. And I know that your foundation will be interested in having young people learn about how Africa got where we are. In 1975, moderator please. 1975, on the 11th of November, I was sitting in a parade in Luanda when the Cuban troops descended in Angola. We had arrived the previous night with the Lopo de Nascimento receiving us at the airport. He was then Prime Minister of Angola. And I was accompanying the Prime Minister of Congo Brazzaville, Henri Lopez, and he received us with these words: "Welcome to Luanda, capital of a country without a government." And we said, "How so?" And he said, "Because at midday today, the last Portuguese governor called a conference here, said goodbye, and took his flag, took a boat to the ship in the high sea, and he has left for Lisbon." And that night, the BBC was announcing that the South African forces, South African, not these ones, huh? I'm talking about the South African forces of that time, in collaboration with UNITA and FNLA, had surrounded Luanda. And we were, with the colleagues, the comrades who were with me at the time, we were talking about the Paris Commune, 1871. We are surrounded, and now the forces that were against the Commune are going to pick us one after another, and we are finished. But when we saw those Cubans marching down the streets in Luanda, we knew this war is not over. And they went on. 3 or 4 years later, there was the historic Battle of Quito Cuanaval. And from then on, the rest, as they say, is history. In 1994, we witnessed the end of apartheid. And that is solidarity. That is Pan-African solidarity. Some people would not classify Fidel Castro as a Pan-Africanist, but he was. Fidel Castro was a Pan-Africanist, Raúl Castro was a Pan-Africanist. A lot of the government of Cuba were Pan-African. Some of them were actually Afro-Cubans, to make it even more poignant. So was Gamal Abdel Nasser. So was Ahmed Ben Bella, who were Arabs, but who supported the African cause, especially in the liberation of the African continent. So young people, please read as much as possible. Don't necessarily read my book, read other books about Pan-Africanism, and we'll be together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Professor Shivji, before you speak, will you allow me to invite everyone in the room who is under the age of 30 to stand up? If you are under, I know, I feel like standing up, but it's not the reality. Your Excellency, you may stand up out of honor. If you are under the age of 30, wanafunzi, nomba msimame, please stand up. Professor Shivji, I'm going to ask you...
Africa at Play with Neto and Neto Chemane.
1600 Central African Time. That was the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that is taking place in East Africa, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania today. The 15th edition is being held under the theme, The State of the Continent. It's also a moment to reflect on the continent's progress, pressing challenges and hope of the African Renaissance. We will be going back to Tanzania to wrap up the 15th edition of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. On that note, happy Africa Day. If you have just joined us, a very warm welcome to Africa at Play. Astelel Siashaya. We are together until 5 p.m. Central African Time. Back again tomorrow, same time from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central African Time. For now, let's go to Lusaka, Zambia, and find out on our legendary correspondent, Namuchana, who's talking to the pundits of football on a topic about youth football, where we're asking about the state of youth football on the African continent and what happens to this talent of Africa in terms of football in different countries. Let's go to Lusaka.
Youth football in Africa has been producing great talent in women and men's continental tournaments like the African Cup of Nations, AFCON Under-17, Under-20 and Under-23. What is the state of youth football in Africa? Are football associations investing enough in youth football? This is our question for this week, and I have with me Mr. Smata, former Football Association of Zambia president. Mr. Smata, thank you so much for having taken time to talk to us on Channel Africa. Today we are looking at youth football on the African continent, and we are asking what is the state of youth football in Africa, and are football associations doing enough to invest in youth football? Mr. Smata, what are your views?
Your question is very, very packed. I'll try and unpack it from where I stand. I think, firstly, youth football in Africa, yes, has been, but it is not because it is organized. No, it's not. It's only recently, actually, that it has become number one food on the table, because the menu was always the old players and what existed. Youth football for a long time in Africa has been natural. I don't know which youth hasn't played football at some point in their life. In the compound, the township, we used to play on the street, 2-a-side, 3-a-side, 5-a-side, 7-a-side, 10-a-side, use a tennis ball, use a homemade ball. Locally in Zambia, we call it chimpombwa, plastic balls. The most common one was named Wembley. There were no
no coaching. It is something that came naturally. So in that regard, I can say to you that youth football, even though having been there, all the time, it was growing on its own. It wasn't organized, I repeat. Youth football has then ended up producing great players like in my country, goal scorer Godfrey Yukachitaru, reputed, and for a fact, 107 goals in one season involving leagues and cups. That is true because I was there. If you went into his background, the great Zumu Njovu, all the players, Fred Muller, our first one of the first exports to Europe and America. He played with the players like Kaiser Mtaun. They didn't come from structured backgrounds. They seemed to just pick up the talent on the ground, in the streets. Why am I saying this? It's because we are used to wild fruits, which we go in seasonally. Either they come by rain or they come by sunshine. We pick and eat. We do not go further to think, if this wild fruit can grow in the wild, why can't we domesticate it and grow it in large abundance on a farm? And that's been the mindset. Lately, of course, you begin to see the introduction of various age group teams, but because even FIFA came on board just recently, I could say, when they brought in the in fact, I think the first milestone was confining the Olympics to under 23. Then they introduced under 20, under 17, under 15, under 13, under 11 are in the works. Compared to Europe, I think we are not doing as good, even though we are moving on the right direction. Secondly, I think one of the major hindrances is that it has started at the top. We didn't create structures below it. It's like climbing a tree by the leaves. That's the stage at which we are. Most of these youth national teams that you see winning, showing hope, do not crystallize into a World Cup winning team because really they don't have the foundations that you find in Europe and other regions on youth development. It started at the top. That's the scary thing. I always wonder how long we are going to rely on natural talent. You see, in other countries, they would pass a policy like all children should now play 4 versus 4 without goalkeepers. Small pitch. Here, if you go off to watch youth teams play football, it's 11 aside, big pitch. We have not yet come to a point where we've realized that a size 5 ball is an adult ball. We haven't come to a point where we've realized that a football ground, 100 meters or 105 meters long, 55 to 65 meters wide, is an adult pitch. We are still more like parents who take their children to buy them shoes, and instead of the child sizing or getting a size that he fits, the adult is the one fitting in and then passing on the shoes to the child, and then simply tying the shoelaces hard enough so that the shoes don't come off. Now, you then find that not much talent comes out of that. They become conditioned. But in the right direction, as soon as we can get youth football organized like you have school. Schools start in my country, Zambia, at grade 1. In fact, even below that now, it's most common to find nursery or elementary school. But there's grade 1, there's grade 2, there are stages right up to grade 12 or Form 5. Then after that, you go to university or college. But what we have in our countries in Africa, most of them, is college. All their teams are big. They win cups, under 17, under 20, but it's college. Nobody cares much about secondary, about primary. I think and see that the European leagues have got it right, where you have 5-year-olds playing football, 7-year-olds playing football, 9-year-olds, and very serious tournaments. Parents involved, sponsors involved. Our sponsors, for instance, would prefer adult football. So it's a whole mambo jumbo. The state of our football, it is still not well organized. We still have a lot to do, especially in the area of age. I understand now that we have MRI that helps us to test But there are methods used in escaping that, which some of them are very sad. Like there's a player out here they really want, but they will go and pose a younger player in the name of the player they want. And MRI is taken on that child, which an elder or older boy or girl will then pose to be the one who was MRI'd. You know, there's such cheating. In fact, in this area, age cheating, I can give you a lot of examples. Once I was appointed national team coach, and a good friend of mine owned a club. So he brought this young man out to my camp and asked if I could include him in the national team. And I said to him, who is he? He gave me his name. And I could remember that name very vividly because I grew up with a very good national team player who was my friend, same class at secondary school. He was approximately 9 years older than me. And then he said that was his son. So I immediately calculated and I said 17 minus 20, 0.002. And I turned and said to my friend, if his is this gentleman's son, but he died 20 years ago. You know, that was the end of that conversation. You know, so I had twins come into my camp. I am referring to them wrongly as they looked alike, but everybody assumed they were twins. I called up. We had no MRI at that. I called up their parent, their father, and I said, "I've got both of your sons here. Are they twins?" He said, "No." And then he described one of them. He said, "The one who looks like this is older. Actually, there's even a sister in between them." So we had to contend with such things where you just used your gut until we get to a day where youth is youth, and I mean 100%. And there's nothing like saying, you know, in this region they are bigger, they are taller, they are more muscular. Kids are kids. We still got a long way. And also, one thing I found being in that position, I was grateful that I had a president who did not have the same attitude I have seen since him, was that when I asked him, what do you really want? He said, I want children. I want the right age. And I can proudly testify here that a couple of my players in the under-17 went on to win the Africa Cup in 2012. That was 10 years later. A lot of them. There were about, I think, 6 or 7 players in that national team. So every time I think back, I said, we had a visionary leader out here. But that doesn't go on all the time because we are excited about winning. We are not as excited about development. And that's where the state of our football, youth football, gets hurt. In the old days, most of the youth football was from the schools. But even then, I could still say that just because somebody is in school does not mean they're youth or they qualify. Because like I said earlier, I had a schoolmate when I went into Form 1, that's after grade 7, in the same class, who had repeated grade 7 times. But when he made it to the national team, it was called the Schoolboy International. If we went on the pitch to play against each other, it would be 21 years versus 12. Now, you already know who the winner in that kind of a game is. You know, he will be faster than me. He'll be stronger than me. And, I ended up getting discouraged from playing football. Not that it's an excuse, but where's my place? By the time I'm reaching grade 12, old enough to play, I'd lost interest, but kept it by being useful to football in other things. So we still got a long way off. If a player today puts on the national jersey and is identified on the pitch, his schoolmates, for heaven's sake, his classmates, his teachers, maybe the parents will keep mum because he may end up bringing some money home, but his classmates won't cry wolf. They won't. They'll cheer him away and he's posing as an under 20 when he's supposed to be 27 or 29. So that wouldn't happen in Europe because the records are there. They'll flash them, the date he was born, the school he went to. In fact, the players themselves would not dare. So the game in Africa has got many disadvantages. I just hope one day we will begin to place them in the correct ages and want development far more than winning, so that the national teams, the senior adult national team, go out there to the World Cup and bring us glory. We should get tired, in my view, with being great at youth football and then nothing at senior football. And I think there are a number of countries in Africa who are known for that. They are very good at youth football, but then when they get to the Africa Cup, they are not even top 8.
Mr. Simata, thank you so much for having taken time to talk to Channel Africa. Those were the views of Mr. Simata, former Football Association of Zambia president. We also sat down with Wezi Mazunda, sports analyst, to get her views.
The media being accused of not giving much coverage to minor sport. True or not? Well, it depends on the kind of minor sport and what experience they've had. I'd like to generalize it. So it depends on the kind of experience that particular minor sport has had with the media. But with my experience, I think most of the time these so-called minor sports have got, for lack of a better term, let me use the word, an inferiority complex. Maybe you have this way of comparing yourself to other so-called major sports, like big sports, popular sports. Okay, I'll give an example. Football mostly, because it's most talked about. So let's look at football. So the first thing that happens is, even just generally when you're working in the media, in the newsroom or in the sports department, when a football story comes, automatically all the attention is given and goes to the football story. So what has tended to happen, in my view, what I see is minor sports to think and say, oh, okay, so every time a minor sport has an event, you always want to put that tag. Somehow you bring that competitive sport in your picture and make yourself look small and let that other sport look big. It may be big, yes, because definitely sports are not the same. Sports like football, it's a fact. Their budgets are big, sponsors are many, so competitions are many, a lot of things are happening here and there everywhere. So for minor sports, that may not be the case. You have little resources, sponsorship, you don't even get to have sponsorship most of the time, so you even beginning to compare yourself with the big sport. And then maybe you want to find someone to blame. So now you're telling yourself, it's obvious the media is going to go to the big sports, cover the major sports and leave us the minor sports. But I feel, and what I would advise the minor sports, I think it's a change of attitude. I think even as a sport itself. In my view myself, I don't believe in minor sports. In coverage of sport, even when I'm speaking, I'll not go, when I go to a certain sport, which maybe one would think is a very sport, I'll just look at it as sport. I'll just look at it as sport, and I'm going there as a professional to cover the event at that sport. And then I'll take it. Obviously, the politics usually come, like I've said, with the newsroom, the editors. It depends, and most of the times, these I've already given the differences in budget, support, following, impact, and everything. But I think it's high time those considering themselves as minor sports change their mindset as well. Stop looking at themselves as minor sports. Begin to learn from the big sports. What are the big sports doing? Okay, if it's media coverage, organize yourself well with the media. Be confident even when you're bringing them together. Understand how the media operates. Most importantly, get a media officer. These sports, minor sports, should get media officers so that these media professionals will know how to speak to the media, target them, because you might find there is a press briefing for an election for a so-called major sport. You, as if you're considering yourself as a minor sport, everybody will rush there. So you are looking at the timings. You in your small sport definitely will not put your event together with the other one. Your event may just suffer, even just getting your position in that particular media. So just understand the media system, understand the timings. It's very important. I think these are the areas that they need to look into, as opposed to shunning that the media doesn't cover. Yes, in some cases, the media doesn't go to cover these minor sports. Sometimes when they do go to cover the minor sports, maybe the reception they receive from these minor sports, because of what I believe is probably the attitude that they're being given, because they say, we know you've come now because you don't have stories. The big sports are not giving enough stories. Now you're coming to us. We're like the by the way thing. It shouldn't be like that. So I think it's about how the minor sports organize themselves, position themselves for the coverage from the media, and then they'll see a change to it. But the starting point is, don't consider yourself a minor sport. Sport is just sport. That's where Africa is missing it. Sport is just sport. Invest, because how are you going to sell yourself as a sport to make yourself big? How are you going to make yourself big? Because there are big events where you can go and prove yourself. There are big events like sporting events like the Commonwealth Games.
Wezi, thank you so much for having taken time to talk to Channel Africa. Wezi Mazunda. Today we were looking at youth football on the African continent. We know that youth football in Africa has been producing great talent in women and men's continental tournaments like the African Cup of Nations, AFCON under 17, under 20, and under 23. We were asking what is the state of youth football in Africa, and are football associations doing enough to invest in youth football? We had Mr. Asmata, former Football Association of Zambia president and the Wezi Mazunda sports analyst for Channel Africa Sports. Namchana from Zambia.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time.
16:19 Central African Time. This is Africa at Play, live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time on DSTV Audio Bouquet Channel 802 or OpenView 628 if you are in South Africa. Alternatively, you can access us from anywhere in the world online on channelafrica.co.za. Also available at your fingertips on SABC+. Let's now bring you up to speed with regards to football matches taking place on the African continent and globally. Starting off with the CAF Champions League playoff match. That is the match between Mamelodi Sundowns and the Pyramids of Egypt. This is the first leg of the CAF Champions League final. Mamelodi Sundowns leading by a beautiful goal scored by Luke Ribeiro, who is the player of Mamelodi Sundowns. A very prolific player, complete player indeed, who can play anywhere in the world. And he's got that important goal on home soil, and it means that when they go back to Cairo, Pyramids will have to dig deep in making certain that they find the equalizer. Depending on how this match ends, over 60 minutes of football has been played in this encounter. Let's now take you to the live action between Mamelodi Sundowns and the Pyramids.
It's a great time to be alive in a South African football supporter overall. When you consider the last AFCON, nobody really expected a semi-final finish. The qualifiers for the AFCON and the World Cup qualifiers, how they've gone for Bafana, the new stars that have come to the fore. As the flag goes up for offside here against Pyramids, they haven't quite had it going since going 1-0 down. And there's also the success, of course, from a Banyana point of view, a Sundowns ladies point of view in the Champions League over recent years as well. They've done well in representing the country. The under-20s recently been crowned AFCON champions and going off to the World Cup. It's a great time to be a South African football supporter. Stellenbosch, what they did in the Confederations Cup. Pirates as well, getting into the semi-finals. Kickstarting this battle between North and South, along with Mamelodi Sundowns and Al Ahly, of course, not forgetting Pyramids. Madiba. Madiba. His 33rd appearance in all competitions. Yet to score this season, you'd expect him to be amongst those that will pop up with a goal or two out at Mamelodi Sundowns. Just the 3 assists for him in the Betway Premiership. I'm sure they would have loved that opener from Ribeiro. Well, the pressure was on. They were in trouble from this point on. Good save then. And it rose kindly for Ribeiro. Kept his cool before smashing it into the back of the net. It has been a beautiful day in Pretoria as it turned into a lovely afternoon for those that have travelled from far and wide. Rainer's in the move. Again, good work in keeping up with him then and keeping an eye on him from Ahmed Saad. Sundowns to have two men that are in great goal scoring nick in both Reynes and Lucas Ribeiro. 19 goals in all competitions, make that 20 with the goal scored today by Ribeiro. Reynes on 21 goals in all competitions. It's Messina's without. Cape Town's Reynes. Foul on the far side. Good spirit shown between the two sets of players. Now, Salis looking for the movement of Reynes and not defensively. Permits do just about enough. Then move it back. Now Mustafa Manane. Looking for the ball over the top to that far side. Tell you what, the first half duel between those two.
Lucas Ribeiro is the scorer for Mamelodi Sundowns, an important goal on home soil. Mamelodi Sundowns are up against Pyramids FC, a side from Egypt. And of course, they will be traveling to North Africa for the return leg of the CAF Champions League final. And it will be decided on aggregate depending on how this match ends and what happens when they get to Cairo. But as it stands, it's Mamelodi Sundowns 1 and Pyramids FC 0. In the Betway Premiership in South Africa, Amazulu Usuthu Mapeshangone is up against Orlando Pirates, and that match is still on 0-0 after 60 minutes of football has been played. Cape Town City, the Citizens, are up against Stellis. 69 minutes of football has been played, still 0-0. Golden Arrows, Sabafana Bestenda, up against Sekhukhune United, and Golden Arrows is leading by 2-1 after 65 minutes of football has been played. Makesi FC up against Marumo Gallants, and it's still 1-1. SuperSport United are trailing by 2-0 against the Natal Rich Boys. The Natal Rich Boys, that is Richards Bay, leading SuperSport United. A game between Kaizer Chiefs and Polokwane City is still on 0-0. Let's take you to the live action.
We beg a pass, first touch. And take a minute up again. Abona Bunyanage, Betanga Manta, Nokoya Duranga, Sabe Pana. Skama said up again, Kaizer Chiefs. She's going to get up a Sangutini. Abonage, Ikondelo, let's come and say up again, Lamontville, Cordinero.
It's still 0-0 between Kaizer Chiefs and Polokwane City, and will continue to bring you up to speed with regards to these matches that are taking place in South Africa and different parts of the African continent and globally. In the La Liga in Spain, Real Madrid is up against Real Sociedad. It's still 0-0 after 9 minutes of football has been played. Espanyol will line up against Las Palmas at 18:30 Central African Time. Leganes up against Valladolid at 18:30, and Alaves up against Osasuna at 2100 Central African Time. Getafe will take on Celta Vigo at 2100 Central African Time. Rayo Vallecano up against Mallorca also at 2100 Central African Time. We will continue to fuel you up with the latest when it comes to these matches that are taking place. In Serie A in Italy, Bologna will take on Genoa at 1800 Central African Time. AC Milan up against Monza at 2045 Central African Time. For now, let's take a song by Farafina that says Africa Dino from Burkina Faso. This is Africa at Play as Delil Siashai.
Africa nyamina. Fadenya kelele bi Africa to.
Opportunity With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle.
You are still tuned in to Africa at Play, the continent's best sport and music destination. We are live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time on DSTV Audio Bouquet Channel 802 if you are in South Africa. Alternatively, you can reach us from anywhere in the world on channelafrica.co.za. Also available on SABC+. Should you miss out on any of our conversations, worry not, you can always visit our Channel Africa website, click on programs and search for Africa at Play. At the bottom right screen of Africa at Play, you click on more to access all those important conversations, and you can listen to them at your time of leisure. My name is Neto Chemane. Hosiati Konyangazimo. We are together until 5 p.m. Central African Time. The game between Kaizer Chiefs and Polokwane City is still sitting on 0-0. And of course, we'll continue to bring you up to speed with regards to all things football on the African continent and globally. And we now go back to Tanzania, where Peter Ndoro is standing by to bring us up to speed with regards to the latest on the 15th edition of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture.
Neto, thank you so much indeed. Yeah, we're at the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center. The lecture has now concluded. It took an interesting format in terms of a conversation that was moderated by a moderator here. And we heard various voices, and I'm joined by the international news editor for the SABC, Sophie Mkwena, as we try and summarize very briefly what we heard today and what it means. Sophie, the theme was the state of the continent, reigniting the African Renaissance. How did you hear what was said and where we are?
Well, I think the panel, because it was senior citizens, that's my first objection. And women voices missing, young people voices missing, and these are senior citizens. They relied mainly on the history of the continent and all of that. But it's good because majority of the audience are young people to understand where we come from, so that when they do certain things, they must know that the freedoms that we enjoy today, many people suffered. Some didn't see those fruits of their labor in terms of fighting for freedom. And then you had this
highlight, I thought.
The two young people. Those were the people who were really zooming in where we are and what must be addressed. And coming from young people, one from Tanzania, one from South Africa, it spoke to the real thing. What are the concerns now? And that's what you have to pay attention to, as they themselves are the future leaders. They were very vibrant.
Fantastic. For me, I thought they were a highlight. So it's 27 years ago that President Mbeki spoke about the African Renaissance in Tokyo. Nearly 30 years ago when he did his famous I'm an African speech, and it really talked about the African Renaissance. For the first time we got a sense of what his vision was. What do you think he must be thinking now, nearly 3 decades later, about this idea that he had about an African Renaissance? 30 years later, where are we?
A lot has happened, a lot needs to be done. And I think he's aggrieved that we've regressed. You had him speaking earlier on. And I think we are really regressing. Something must happen. These young leaders must come in as the new leadership and be very focused on deliverables, not just the good speeches that we will never forget. Even our great-great-grandchildren will be still talking about that beautiful speech of Thabo Mbeki, I'm an African, but on the ground nothing has happened. And therefore that sense of agency in terms of the implementation. And as you heard one of the young people saying, we are impatient.
2063 is too far away to wait for radical transformation. We have to wrap up, unfortunately, but one gets a sense that something needs to happen quickly, because when we see people like Ibrahim Traore being loved and endeared as a young leader, we'll probably see more of that if we don't see quick movement in terms of Agenda 2063 perhaps happening 20 years earlier.
You'd recall when he was speaking at UNISA, I think last year and a year ago, you know, Mbeki is always ahead. He warned that what's happening in Sahel region in West Africa, if we don't attend to the concerns of the young people, it will be a norm. And therefore, don't condemn the young generals, engage them, understand what's the problem, and try to push that they go to elections and you integrate them as part of the African Union. But the African Union is not doing that, and therefore you will see this happening. That is why in recent time we saw those protests in and outside Africa in support of Traore. And I can tell you, Peter, Mbeki will be traveling to West Africa, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. It means he now wants to engage them.
Sophie, it's been a pleasure talking to you and listening to this lecture together. And Neto, that's where we're going to leave it, from the Julius Nyerere Convention Center, where we've been listening to the Thabo Mbeki annual Africa Day lecture that has captured, I think, the imagination of most of the people here. From us, thanks very much.
That is Peter Ndoro, one of Channel Africa's greatest, who's currently in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, covering the 15th edition of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture. And that's how we wrap up the proceedings in Dar es Salaam. Let's now take you to Nigeria to find out what's the latest in the world of sport in Nigeria.
Former Super Eagles coach Samson Siasia has expressed concern over Nigeria's slim chances of qualifying for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, stating that the national team would need nothing short of a miracle to reach the tournament. Siasia acknowledged that while mathematically possible, Nigeria's route to the World Cup is now highly improbable given their current position in the qualification standings. I think they will need a miracle, but at the end of the day, it's all about the fact that it sinks, right? Siasia said bluntly. So they have to go out there and do their best, give it their best shot, because as difficult as it is, nothing is impossible. Nigeria currently sits in 5th place in Group C of the African qualifiers with just 3 points from 4 matches, well behind leaders South Africa and Rwanda. Siasia explained the importance of unity, urgency, and commitment from the players and staff when the team regroups for the next round of qualifiers. You know, you have to talk to the players. They need to talk to themselves too. They know what to do to win the last couple of games to qualify. So it's not going to be a walk in the park. But if we all come together, we have great players. It's just for them to come together and play as a team to score goals. I think they have to win the rest of their matches to qualify. Despite the difficult outlook, Siasia urged the team to remain serious, focused, and determined. Everything is possible. It's the way you take care, the way you are serious about it. And if you want to win, you put your best foot out there and make sure everybody plays together and make it happen. Nothing is impossible. Samson Siasia, who previously led Nigeria's under-23 team to the Olympic silver in 2008 and managed the Super Eagles at various points, remains hopeful but realistic. This pressure mounts on current coach Eric Chell and the Nigeria Football Federation, NFF, to rescue the 2026 World Cup dream before it slips away. Samson Siasia speaks.
I think they would need a miracle. But hey, at the end of the day, it's all about 35-86, right? So you have to go out there and do their best, give it their best shot. Because as difficult as it is, but nothing's impossible. You know, you need to talk. They have to talk to the players, talk to themselves. They know what to do to win the last couple of games to qualify. So it's not going to be a walk on the park, but if they all come together, we have great players. It's just for them to come together and play as a team, to score goals. And I think they have to win the rest of their matches to qualify.
Nigeria named a stronger Super Eagles side for the upcoming Unity Cup in London with Ahmed Musa, Kelechi Iheanacho, and Cyril Dessers returning. But Galatasaray striker Victor Osimhen was a notable absentee. 2 squads have been named ahead of the Four Nations Unity Cup tournament in London this month and a friendly against Russia on June 6th. Osimhen has been excused as Super Eagles coach Eric Chell named the 25-man squad to compete in the Four Nations Unity Cup, which kicks off at Brentford's G-Tech Community Stadium on May 27. Chell has also named the separate 21-player roster for a high-profile friendly against Russia on June 6 at the Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow as Nigeria ramp up preparations for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations. In announcing the dual squads, Chell emphasized the opportunity to evaluate both new and returning players ahead of crucial fixtures later in the year. He said, "We are looking forward to taking part in the Unity Cup as it will give us the chance to try out a few new players in different roles, helping us to strengthen our squad before the matches in September and October." Musa, who has been playing for Kano Pillars in the Nigeria Premier Football League since leaving Turkish side Sivasspor, has not featured for Nigeria since November 2024 when he played in the 1-2 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying loss to Rwanda. That game also was Kelechi Iheanacho's last appearance for the Super Eagles as a former Leicester City forward struggled for form and game time at Sevilla before being loaned to Middlesbrough. But it is the recall of Ibrox hero Dessers that will come as pleasing music to the ears of Nigerian fans. The forward has been in good form for Rangers this season, and his inclusion comes on the back of a prolific season where he has scored 21 goals across all competitions. And still on the Unity Cup, as Nigeria prepares for the highly anticipated Unity Cup tournament in London, two Super Eagles greats, Ike Shoromu and Duke Udi, have thrown their weights behind current head coach Eric Chell for his commendable decision to blend homegrown talents from the Nigeria Premier Football League with established foreign professionals. Their endorsement comes as Chell named a 25-man squad set to face off against Ghana in the semi-finals of the Unity Cup on May 28th, with a tournament final billed for May 31st at the GTEC Community Stadium in West London. Chell's approach evokes memories of legendary Nigerian coaches such as Clemens Westerhoff, Stephen Keshi, and Bonfrey Joe, all of whom famously integrated domestic league players into the national team fabric. That tradition, which played a crucial role in Nigeria's golden football era of the 1990s, appears to be receiving a modern-day revival. Former number one goalkeeper for the Eagles, Shoromu, noted that Chelsea's inclusion of 9 to 10 MPFL players is not only strategic, but inspirational for local talents. Yes, I think it's a good one, a good development, Shoromu said. Counting the number of home-based players, I could see 9. This is great for the MPFL. It's a way of encouraging our domestic league and showing belief in the talent available at home. When asked whether Chell is intentionally following the footsteps of former coaches like Westerhoff and Casey, Shoromu affirmed, "Yes, I think it's always good. Chell did something similar while he was coaching in Mali. It's best to ensure the local league is encouraged. It's very, very important." Shoromu also expressed optimism about Nigeria's chances at the tournament. Why not? They are going there to compete. If they put everything they have into it, I believe they can win. Ike Shoromu speaks.
Because I always said, yes, you want to build a team, the second is the second holds. We are doing our professional league back home here to give some good legs, some good hands in the league to join the finals. And the whole of that will be doing, for the clubs that play the league here. We challenge the one that comes from here. So the only thing you can get over those specialists out there, the facility they go out there, and it's a good one, and good development, and it help our league improve more better.
Similarly, Duke, a versatile midfielder from Nigeria's golden generation, held the squad list as a refreshing nod to player development. It's a good one. I believe Chell wants to give some other people a chance to play, which is good. It's a mix of foreign and home-based players. I hope the home-based will take the advantage of this opportunity. Udi emphasized the significance of performance for local players in such international settings. There aren't too many professionals in there, so the home-based players need to showcase their talents. As a player, this is the kind of opportunity you are looking for. When you are called upon, you have to give your best because the coach has already done his part. There is no friendly game. It means a lot for the newcomers to break into the game. Duke Udi speaks.
A friendly game. Every game, as a top-class professional player. Why are you a professional player? You are a professional player because you are being paid for what you are doing. That is why you are different from the amateur player. Amateur player just play for fun. But as a top-class professional player is that you are being paid for what you are doing, and you know what you want to do. And what you want to do about football is for you to give me your best and to win games. There's no friendly game. Our national team name and Nigeria name is at stake. And don't forget, FIFA gives points when they want to categorize teams for their position. They look at all these friendly, high the ladder, for Nigeria to come up to become among the best or the best in the world. We have to do what? We have to take our friendly matches seriously. I'm not saying inviting players to come and play, new players to come and play. That means we are going there they just go there to come and... No. There's nothing like friendly game. A match is a match.
Newly installed president of West African Football Union, Wafu Zombe, and president of Nigeria Football Federation, Alhaji Ibrahim Musa Guzo, has outlined his vision and mission for the regional football supervising body, emphasizing on the need to develop the game through the grassroots by focusing on youth competitions, articulating an aggressive marketing strategy to get corporates to support the game, and espousing on the need for commitment to the ideals of unity and brotherhood. Guzo is the fifth Nigerian to hold a top position in the West African sub-regional football body. The NFF president said, "Our country, Nigeria, must make use of this opportunity that has come at this time. It's important to make a positive impact with this fresh opportunity for the sake of our football and our country. The focus will be on more competitions, especially at youth level, to align with CAF's objectives. One of CAF's main goals is to increase the number of competitions in our regions while encouraging grassroots participation. Nigeria, alongside Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Cote d'Ivoire, all in the Wafu B zone, has been the bastion of African youth football for decades. Nigeria's Golden Eagles have won the FIFA Under-17 World Cup 5 times, while Ghana's Black Starlets have been champions 3 times. Ghana's Under-20 boys Black Starlets won the FIFA Under-20 World Cup in 1999, and Nigeria have been runners-up in the same championship in 1989 and 2005, while winning the bronze medals in 1985. Even at the senior level, Wafu B teams are very strong. Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire contested the final of the last Africa Cup of Nations. Nigeria have been AFCON champions 3 times and Ghana 4 times. Nigeria was also the first African country to win the Olympic gold medal in football, while Ghana was the first to win any football medal of any shape, bronze, in 1992. We must find a way to maintain and even raise the level of our performances in major competitions in order to sustain our pride of place in the international game, the NFF president said. Ibrahim Guzo speaks.
We thank all of you. When you see somebody have opportunity to lead an organization, and then along the line he's been organized to even go higher, it means that he's getting the support of the people he's working with. Because if you people are not giving me all the support that is needed, I may not be in a full confidence and the privilege to be exposing myself to that level. So I must thank all of you for your support for the period of time that God has given us to steer the affairs of the Federation. And more so, I must say I feel delighted because the last time somebody from Nigeria hold this position, I think should be around 20-something years. The last person is Dr. Amos Amadamu. So, and we feel Nigeria is far, far, far ahead of that because we cannot have a regional body that we can stay this long without having somebody to have the capacity to hold the helm of the affairs of that organization.
Flying Eagles coach Aliou Zubairu has promised to build a more competitive team ahead of the 2025 FIFA Under-20 World Cup built to be held in Chile. Chile will hosted the Under-20 World Cup for the first time in 1987. We host it again from September 27 to October 19, 2025, with 23 countries contesting for the top prize. Zubairu is aiming to be Nigeria's first winning coach of the competition, which has given the country silver and bronze medals in the past. Speaking on the Flying Eagles' performance at the just concluded African Under-20 Cup of Nations in Egypt, where Nigeria won a bronze medal, Zubairu said the Continental Championship has opened his eyes to the needs of the team, adding that he will scout for players to beef up his squad. Nigeria lost 0-1 to the Amajita of South Africa in the semi-finals of the Under-20 AFCON, but defeated Egypt via a penalty shootout to win the bronze medal. Coach Aliou Zubairu speaks.
Evaluate our performance there and evaluate the players individually. You know who are those players that are not continuing the journey. And we'll immediately start looking for those we are going to invite for replacement. Because definitely we know there are a lot of deficiencies in the team, particularly in the area of attack. And we are going to overhaul the whole department as well. And like you know, maybe you have heard that the Wafu tournament is coming up. Now that our president is even the president of Wafu, we want to honor that competition. So I think that is going to be a competition where we are going to even test those whom we are going to invite for us to know their level, to know those who can fit into the replacement.
Also speaking on their outing, Captain Daniel Bamaye, who is the only Nigerian to make the CAF 11, said that the team will be ready for the World Cup. Daniel Bamaye speaks.
Tournament on not just me, but from also my colleagues, my brothers. Despite the fact it didn't go the way we planned it, or give God the glory. One thing is sure, because like they say change is constant, and which means we must have to change, like kind of like improve, positive change. We need to improve because now we are going to the big stage, the world stage. So we'll try to see how we improve on that. We need to improve. Mentally, I know we are okay. Physically, we are good. And just for us to try to go into camp and try to organize ourselves properly so that we can have a good outing at the World Cup.
And before we go, we now look into athletics to tell you that Nigerian athlete Favour Ofili recently made history as the fastest woman 150-meter straight track runner. The Port Harcourt-born broke the world record last week at the 150 meters Adidas Atlanta City Games. The 22-year-old emerged the first woman to ever run 150 meters in 16 seconds against the previous record of 16.23 seconds set in 2018 by Shwane Mila Ubo. Ofili said, "The Lord is good and is marvelous in my sight. I'm surprised with the time, but I know I put in the work. I trust my coach. I trust his program, and I know at the right time the Lord will do it." Ofili set an African record in 200 meters with a time of 22.36 seconds at the Tyson Invitational in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Her new feat has placed her on a global athletics map. The Nigerian athlete, who was withdrawn from the women 100 meters at the last Olympics in France, said that she was depressed by the actions of officials of Team Nigeria. She noted, however, that her recent performance has shown that she is gradually coming out of the depression and bringing her confidence back. Favour Ofili speaks.
By the time I started, I'm like, I don't think that's right. But then he ended up being right. So I'm just grateful to God for the whole. I think we're taking it one step at a time. I'm trusting my coach, trusting the program, his workout, trusting what he's telling me to do. And because I don't know anything, I just listen to him and just go. That's where I am. And with that being going on forward like that, a lot of stuff ain't stuck for me. A lot of things ain't stuck for me. I mean, you don't just say how do you shake that away. It takes a lot, you know. We had to go to therapy. My confidence was lost, trying to build it back again. I almost lost my mom. There's a whole news, seeing her daughter everywhere, you know. But it takes time, you know. But I'm trusting God with the whole thing, believing that He said at the right time He will do it. And I'm trusting Him gradually. And I'm living the rest. I'm not overthinking no more. But I'm just, you know, trying to build my confidence back little by little, and I will get there.
Super Falcons head coach Justin Madugu has invited a total of 23 players, among them Captain Rashida Tajibade, goalkeeper Chiamaka Nadozie, defender Michel Alozie, midfielder Tony Payne, and forward Rinshola Babajide for the upcoming two friendly matches against the indomitable Lionesses of Cameroon. There are also defenders Osinachi Ohale, Oluwatosi Demenyi, and Shukrat Oladepo, midfielders Deborah Abiodo and Jennifer Ichegine, and forwards Ifeoma Onomono and Francisca Odega. The Falcons and the Lionesses will face off at the Remo Stars Stadium Ikene, Remo on Saturday 31st May before a second confrontation at MKO Abiola Sports Complex in Abeokuta on Tuesday 3rd June, where the Falcons will use the match as part of their preparations for the 13th Women Africa Cup of Nations taking place in Morocco from 5th to 26th July. The Lionesses will use the games to stay in shape for future challenges, having failed to qualify for this year's Women AFCON finals. All invited 23 players have been directed to arrive at the AM 2 p.m. hotel in Ijebuede on Monday, 26th May. Coach Justin Madugu speaks.
For such opportunities and hoping that with more games like that, you hope to assess your team and then see how far you have gone, areas that you need to still work on, areas of your strength and areas of your weaknesses, and then to also assess the players and see who really fits into what you really want, so that as you continue to prepare, get closer to the competition, you try and get those information to help you get a team that will feel can really do the country proud. 9-time
champions Nigeria, they also won the two non-tournament format competitions in 1991 and 1995, will be up against Tunisia, Algeria and Botswana in Group B of the 13th Women AFCON in Morocco. For Channel Africa Sports, Tony Obane reporting from Lagos, Nigeria.
16:57 Central African Time. It is that time of the afternoon where we've got to bow out and say our goodbye. Look forward to Mix Vibration with Anika Launch. We will be back tomorrow from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. We will be live on DSTV Audio Bouquet Channel 802 or OpenView 628 if you are based in South Africa. Alternatively, you can reach us from anywhere in the world on channelafrica.co.za. Also available on SABC Plus. Thank you to my producer Andisiwe Fagimalu Zobona Mali and our sound engineer, that is Mondli Mtambi. My name is Neto Neto Chemane. Hosiati konyangazi mumkhatshwa phandle kunjani moyani vokuvoku dendele Africa at Play asideleli siyashaya. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.